What people don't need is more information for travel planning, and what they need is better information.
Recommendations from people that I know are always far superior to reading reviews online from strangers, because somebody that I know could tell me like, hey, I know you're a big foodie, you would love this restaurant.
100%. And there's big business around reviews, but also the accumulation of reviews. Like they know that the higher they appear in their rankings, the better their reviews are. Like you'll go into restaurants and see a little placard on the table that says like, leave us a review and get a free dessert or something. And it's like, okay, well, I'm sitting here, they're watching me leave a review. I'm not going to leave them a 1-star review and be like, I'll take my free dessert now. Like I'm going to leave a 5-star review just because I want the free dessert. Recommendation of a friend is worth immensely more than 10,000 reviews from random strangers online. And what people don't need is more information for travel planning, and what they need is better information. That's part of the thesis. Like, where does that better information come from? I reckon to say it's not filtery travel influencers. It's not, we need more online reviews. It's not more reels. It's the people you know, people you trust. And so that's a fringe example, but like reviews just aren't always representative of the reality of one's experience. And for that matter, they tend to be just very polarizing in both ways, where you get like the uber positive just because someone had a fantastic experience, which we wouldn't necessarily call the average, or just could be legitimately fake in the example of like the free dessert.
Welcome to Entrepreneurship Anywhere. I am your host, Nikki Corbett. On this podcast, we talk all about entrepreneurship. Stories from startups to businesses that are thriving, and even a few who have had stellar exits. We talk about it all. My goal for you as a listener is to learn, be inspired, find folks to relate to, and even motivate you, as opportunities for entrepreneurship are abundant. And if they can do it, so can you. Entrepreneurship Anywhere, because no great venture started without the audacity to begin. I'm so happy you're here. What is up, everybody? I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and I am very excited for my guest here today because we are going to be talking all things travel, which if you have been following me for a while, you know that I just got back from a wonderful adventure. So Sam Simmons from MintPass, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. Super excited to be talking about travel, something very near and dear to my heart. And what's better than that? And just being able to talk shop on travel for a while.
I mean, like I said before we started recording, I hardly wrote down any questions because I don't need to prepare for a conversation about travel. I am so stoked. And then also one other thing that we have in common is we're both alumni from the great University of San Diego. Go Toreros.
That's right. Go Toreros. It's when's the last time you were on campus?
Way too long ago, because the stories that friends of mine who have been there tell me, I'm like, would I even recognize it?
That's right.
It doesn't sound like it.
Different world down there, but it's still amazing as it was when we were there. So some things never change.
I bet. I mean, it was so beautiful back then. I can only imagine they've made it more and more beautiful as time has gone on. So San Diego is definitely high on my list to get to visiting soon.
Absolutely. Love it down there.
All right. Well, let's talk travel. So MintPass is the result of all of your travels and wanting to organize all the amazing places that you have been. So how did this idea come to life?
Absolutely. It's kind of like a startup cliche to say like the best products come from a need that oftentimes the founder has in their own course of life. And that's really what this came from, where my wife and I, we've been together for 10 years now. In fact, behind me, for those that might be watching the video version of this, behind me is a rack of souvenirs that I've collected over the years. I have like some Pokemon from Japan here. Up above is an Eiffel Tower Lego set from our first big trip together that we did in Paris. And so like the foundation of our relationship was really built around travel and all the cool places we've been together. And all the while, something that we've done, more I say we, but really I'm just like giving myself credit for her work. What really she's done is been religious about creating these like Apple Notes documents with everything we do when we go somewhere. And the value of that is, I mean, yes, if we go back, like we'd love to do some of the things again, but really the value of it is the ability to share that with other people. And so when our friends take trip places, we kind of become the people they go to for recommendations, where if they know we've been somewhere or they want to find out if we've been somewhere, because we tend to have good recommendations for them, they come to us for that information. And so that was, while she's doing the actual work, I did the easy work of just thinking about things. And so that thinking led to what MintPass is, which is basically a way to document and store recommendations, more easily share with friends, and then earn rewards for doing so. And that's really where this all kicks into into gear is like
Mm-hmm.
I think about the amount of business we've sent to big hotels, major chains,
Right.
and the positive outcomes and the experiences had that
Mm-hmm.
we've generated from making these recommendations. And so not yes, a little bit for ourselves, but also for a lot of other people, we want to
Yeah.
bring the best recommendations to light and properly acknowledge and reward those who discover those and share them with others.
Okay. I mean, I think this is so cool because, like we talked about when we first met, it's like the Google Docs, the Notes app, all these like the reviews that you put one time on Booking or on TripAdvisor. When someone mentions they're going somewhere that you've been 10 years ago, you're like, oh my God, what was that restaurant? And you're searching through all these things to try to find it. To be able to have all of that in one place sounds like absolute heaven.
Yeah, I mean that's the most frustrating part of the current process is just the flow of information, and for that matter, the loss of information much of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
you have certainly been in that spot of sitting there like, what was that place that I went to 10 years ago in Barcelona that was amazing that I want to tell my friend about, or I want to go back to myself, but I just can't think of it. And so it's honestly like it's a sort of like, it's a high class problem, you might say, but thinking about how this information scales to create more fruitful travel experiences at large, I think is really interesting. And then properly, I just think, and this is, I not to soapbox on this, but we've all been in the spot of seeing something on social media and going to a restaurant when you're traveling and maybe having a suboptimal experience because it's TikTok famous for different reasons than the actual quality of the experience. So like it's also an alignment of what actually matters, which is positive outcomes as opposed to over glamorized inputs, which to us is getting authentic recommendations from people you can legitimately trust is one, but then two, once you have a good time, then crediting that back to its origination being the person who recommended it and creating this whole sort of social architecture around that. So it's very early, so we'll see what it shakes out to be. But these conversations excite me because it seems there's something there.
Oh, I absolutely think there's something there. I mean, because if you think about it, like anything in this day and age, right? Like I often say that the invention of the internet has been life-changing for literally everyone, but it's also almost like we're inundated on a daily, hourly, minute basis by so much information that it's almost like in some cases we just are become so ignorant because it's just too much to even try to process something and figure out what it is that you need. And then with travel, I mean, as a seasoned of a traveler as I am, like I have made wrong decisions. I have booked a hotel that, the pictures look amazing. And then you get there and you're like, have these sheets been cleaned this decade? I mean, things like that where you're just like, okay. And when you're going to book things for places that you've never been, and especially for people who are working within all types of budgets, somebody could ask you for a recommendation and you could have 10 great recommendations, but perhaps they're, not in their budget, or perhaps your friends are much more bougie than you and they want something bigger and better. And you're like, oh, shoot, I've never stayed there. So there's so many things to consider when traveling. And with travel, most people, they're on limited time and they want to make the best out of every moment that they have. So, I mean, I think that recommendations from people that I know are always far superior to reading reviews online from strangers, because somebody that I know could tell me like, hey, I know you're a big foodie, you would love this restaurant, versus just reading a review and, like you said, perhaps stumbling up in somewhere TikTok famous, but that is not delicious.
Yeah, no, exactly. We say that a recommendation from a friend is worth immensely more than 10,000 reviews from random strangers online. And there's a larger, excuse me while I sort of sidebar here, but you mentioned something in passing around just like the amount of information online that's available. And I think we're not only in a information crisis, but we're in an attention crisis with with everything in our lives that literally it's designed to take your attention away from other things. And so we're just constantly competing across platforms, apps, activities, television shows, whatever the case may be. And I think this is just, I'm going to land the plane here, I promise you. But there's a larger theme here around like AI as well, where it's never been easier to create content and as a offshoot of that, create information. And we're now at a point in specifically where in many cases it takes less time to create the content than it does to consume it. And so that's part of the bet that we're making, where not only is there too much information today, but there will continue to be too much and too much more information over time as information gets easier to create. And the barrier to entry for information and content gets lower and lower, which is good for a lot of reasons, but bad for also others because it waters down the inputs at large. And so that is really the bet that we're making. And frankly, in many cases, it's a contrarian bet where what people don't need is more information for travel planning, and what they need is better information. That's part of the thesis. Like, where does that better information come from? I reckon to say it's not, filtery travel influencers. It's not, we need more online reviews. It's not more reels. It's not more reviews. It's the people you know, people you trust. Yeah. And if you don't know them, we give you reason to trust them because of what they've been verified to do in the sort of the travel credibility profile they've assembled on our platform. And the ability to take those recommendations as more valid, more fruitful, given the positive outcomes that have been proven to come from that person's recs.
No, that was so well put, what you just said, because it is so true that like, it's not like they don't need more Google reviews. So I have a funny story. So there's a restaurant in Thessaloniki, Greece, where I spent 2 months over the last few months. And it was my third time visiting there. It is truly my favorite place in the world. And there is a restaurant there. And I went there the first time I visited the city with my mom. Very authentic, Greek taverna type food. We ended up going there the second time we visited, not necessarily because we were like, oh my God, it was amazing, but more because we were like, it's good. And we happened to be walking by it and we were hungry. We're like, oh, let's just go here again. It was good. So this time I'm sitting at this other restaurant with some friends that I had made. And my girlfriend's husband, he's Greek and he's from that city. And he's like, hey, have you heard of this restaurant? And I said, yeah, I have. And he goes, of course. He's like, all of the foreigners end up going there. And I said, well, hold on. I said, I haven't been there on this trip and I'm not planning to. And I said, but like, what are you, why did you bring it up? And he said, well, he's like, somebody asked me if I had ever been there. And I said, no. He's like, so I was curious and I looked it up because it's basically right in the city center. And he's like, oh, it has so many positive reviews. And so he's like, so I went and he's like, oh, it's fine, but it's not like it was like this Michelin star, like hidden gem that everybody should be going to when they visit Thessaloniki. So it was just funny because it truly has amazing reviews, but it's like, at what point do you trust reviews? At what point do you, believe that just because something has 5,000, 4.8 star reviews, that it is going to give you like the authentic experience that maybe you're hoping for.
100%. And there's big business around reviews, but also the accumulation of reviews. And these business owners are very smart. Like they know that the higher they appear in their rankings, the better their reviews are, the more business that they will drive. And so there's a real, like you'll go into restaurants and see a little placard on the table that says like, leave us a review and get a free dessert or something. And it's like, okay, well, I'm sitting here, they're watching me leave a review. I'm not going to leave them a 1-star review and be like, I'll take my free dessert now. Like I'm going to leave a 5-star review just because I want the free dessert. And so that's a fringe example, but like reviews just aren't always representative of the reality of one's experience. And for that matter, they tend to be just very polarizing in both ways, where you get like the uber positive just because someone had a fantastic experience, which we wouldn't necessarily call the average, or just could be legitimately fake in the example of like the free dessert. But then on the flip side of that, I'm sure you've had this experience, but I've gotten recommendations where I'm like, my wife had said, okay, we trust this person. We're going to go to this restaurant, but like, let's look at in advance. Let's look at like what we could order and kind of plan out our order in advance. Cause you kind of gotta see it before you order it. And so we'll go to the review site and it'll be like 2.5, 3 stars. And we're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, is this, what are we walking into? But the recommendation trumps the rating, and you go and, there's typically the litany of experience or litany of reasons why the bad reviews would take hold. But what I often find most is that it's like, Americans who are going into Europe expecting American standards of service that they don't get in Europe. And so they like, oh, this is bad service, 1 star. Meanwhile, the restaurant doesn't give a shit. Like the restaurant's sitting there like they may or may not even know that TripAdvisor exists. They're not out there like trying to solve for reviews. They're just here to serve good food and be about their day. And so what happens is you have like the most amazing, authentic, and I say authentic in a number of ways for the food, but the service, the ambiance, the people around you, the most authentic meal you could abroad, but you'd never discover it, or you would even just write it off if you had found it on a review site, because of the reviews that have skewed it and thus give you a bias going into the situation. So it's just, there's a lot of, it goes both ways to your point. Like it goes to the
absolutely.
positive, but also the negative.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing too, is like, I'm a big review reader just because I am curious. And so there's two comments I wanted to make. One, it's like when you just type something into Google, right? Like an example is I was just in Istanbul and we wanted to do Turkish breakfast. So my friend that I was traveling with, she goes on Google and she comes out and she's like, hey, she's like, oh, I saw this restaurant. She's like, oh, but you're better at doing this research than I am. So like, why don't you take a look? So I go on Google and like the restaurant that she had been talking about was the very first one that popped up, and it did have great reviews and it had great photos, but it was also a sponsored, it was sponsored. So it was right at the top. So I told her, I said, hey, do you understand how that works? And she was like, oh, okay. So what I did is I kept scrolling. I found a blog that was written by a couple that had moved there. I think they were Turkish, but they had just moved to Istanbul and they'd been there for like 4 years. And then they went and they had been to a million different breakfast places. And they were like, here's our like top 20, in the city. So then I was able to like really filter in. And then I found a place and I said, hey, take a look at this. And she's like, oh my God, that looks great. So we walked there. It was one of the best meals of the trip, but it's like, I wouldn't have found that restaurant just by Googling. Mm-hmm. I went through the steps to find a blog written by someone who, they claim they're foodies. They've obviously been a lot of places. So I think that is like, that's what I know as a traveler, that's what I want. Mm-hmm. But then going back to the negative reviews or places that, maybe have like a 3.5 stars where you might be like, do we want to give it a whirl? That's the kind of stuff that drives me crazy, because you read some of these reviews and people are complaining about like, there wasn't enough ice in the water, or I went there and ordered takeout and it took 45 minutes at lunchtime. Okay, well, you could ask for more ice, or maybe the food is so good that's why they have such a long line at lunchtime, and that's why it took so long. It's just like,
no, and that's exactly right, and that's what's unfortunate is if you think about like what inspires someone to take the time to leave a review, and so often it's that of like, I'm late for my next meeting after my lunch break and I'm pissed off, so I'm going to take it out on the restaurant, right. And it's like it's unfortunate that it not only punishes the establishment itself unfairly, but also dissuades people like us from potentially having a great authentic meal or just a generally experience abroad, because that bias seeps into our psyche. Mm-hmm. And it comes down to a number of things. The one I always think about is like, in especially in certain parts of Europe, and certainly less so in like touristy establishments, but in like the really authentic places, you don't get waited on. Like you have to call for service whenever you want something. That's how it is over there. So if you come in as an American thinking like, all right, well, I'm going to wait to put my drink order in, or I'm going to wait for them to come to take my food order. You're sitting there for 30, 45 minutes and they haven't even thought about you, because that's just not how it operates. And so it's easy with sort of that lens of expectation in mind to say, well, the service sucked, 1 star, but that's just what it's like over there. And I think it's unfair to make that assessment with your own bias in mind.
Absolutely. I remember being in Beijing, and that was one of the first places I had been as a traveler. And I was on a tour, and we had we'd gone to the Great Wall, and then we came back into the city and we went to a place and had lunch. And I remember our tour guide just like, raising her hand and yelling to get, and I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, just getting the waiter. I was like that? Like what? Like, because it seemed like she was yelling at him, and I was like, this is crazy, but now I get it. Okay. This is normal.
Exactly. So it's just, you really have to, and that's where like this is going to go back to the earlier point you made about the blog you found with like the experts in Turkish breakfast, where that's where like the social graph element comes into play here, because not only do we assess based upon like who's well-traveled and who's not, but also where you've been a lot, and thus where you have great recommendations and where you have a certain level of expertise, and how do you become like a designated tastemaker, as we call them, in that given region. So rather than being some, and no knock on anyone's blog, but like blog that probably very few people are going to read unless the SEO picks it up based upon some long tail search, best Turkish breakfast, blah, blah, blah. Like how do we create a new way for that expertise to be discovered? Part one, but more so part two, give them credit for that. Like properly allocate value to what that's doing to other people's trips, and make sure that value flows back to its origination. I think there's a larger theme there around just like platform dynamics of like I could leave 10,000 reviews and I get really no value in return. Like TripAdvisor is extracting that value and being able to convert bookings and all of these things. And so there's not that we want to go down this road, but there's some crypto and Web3 elements that we're playing with on that front. But that's really where that comes into play of trying to like introduce incentive alignment to travel recommendations to properly reward and recognize those with the best.
Yeah, no, that's, I was going to ask you about that. So as you guys are rolling this out and, you know, first of all, I'm sure the answer is going to be yes. And I'm praying it is, because I have probably 12 years of travel content that I want to load into this app. Yeah. So we will be able to backdate things.
So yes, that is coming. So to start with, which we're in soft launch at the moment, depending on when this is released, we may actually be launched. But if you look up MintPass in the App Store, even today, we're there. Cool. But early on, it's very much forward-looking information or information documentation is how I think about it. So like I'm taking a trip. I'm now traveling. I'm going to log my various experiences during that travel. I'm going to end the trip. When I'm done traveling, that gives me what we call a digital souvenir. And what that is, in fact, is an NFT, which is basically a digital verification of one's travel experiences. Okay. And that becomes that part of the digital record to say, much like I have my souvenir shelf behind me where I have in a way evidence of I've been to Japan, I've been to Paris, I've been to, I think that's New York down there. We have a digital record of our travel activities based upon your mobile geolocation data. So it creates that trust and authenticity layer that doesn't really exist today, where I have no idea if someone actually who left a 5-star review on this restaurant actually went there or when they were there or how valid that is. So that's the forward looking part. But then to answer your question in regards to backdating, we'll have basically a verified versus unverified layer. So I have a long list of Apple Notes that I have to personally load into the system very, very quickly. And so we don't want to leave that out. Like there's valuable information there. So we're looking at like different ways to make that upload process more automated, but you will be able to backdate your recommendations to add in and create lists of everything, everywhere you've been, be able to share those lists more easily and start getting rewarded when those lists are shared. It's just a question of like the verified versus unverified there. Because obviously we don't want necessarily people to come in and say, oh yeah, I've been to all these places, and then get that verified credit for things that they maybe haven't done.
Okay, that makes sense. So that was I think you partially answered one of my other questions, which was going to be like, you know, you travel all these different places. A lot of times there's different languages, different alphabets, like all the things. So that's how it's going to work when you open the app? It'll like sync with a Google or some sort of map, and it will kind of say like, are you at ABC restaurant? There's
basically location-based APIs. So I always, it's an interesting example because there's a very specific, very small hole-in-the-wall beef restaurant out of Tokyo that I always recommend. And like, I don't know if you've been to Japan before or Tokyo.
I haven't yet. It's very high on my list.
Yes, it is amazing. And I have recommendations for you, including this small hole-in-the-wall place. But they have these like giant, like multi-level shopping centers with these small little restaurants pocketed, and they'll have like 5 tables in it. And so if I were to open my phone or try to figure out like, hey, where the hell am I? I would, and then with the different alphabet and characters, like I would have a hard time being able to assign, okay, I see this, I want to write that down and send people here. So we'll have the APIs to basically source like, hey, it looks like you're here, but we're not going to get it right every time, especially in a facility that. So like we have nearby places, and then you could basically cross-reference where you're at and what type of establishment it is between restaurants, hotels. We'll have different like in-app terminology for all of these things to identify where those are. And as we get further along too, we're exploring with like, how do we automate the logging process? Because one of the things that I personally, there's a reason why my wife has done this for so many years and I haven't. It's because I don't like being on my phone, and I'd rather be there in the moment as opposed to documenting the moment for other people in the future. So bless her heart for doing so, but I hate it. So what I'd much rather do is have my phone in my pocket, know where I'm at, and create this record of where I've been, such that like either at the end of the day or even the end of the trip, I can go back and say, okay, let's now do my daily digest. And we could say, hey, it looks like you were here overnight. Were you staying at this hotel? You stopped around noontime at this restaurant. Did you come here for lunch? And then be able to add in, oh yeah, I was here. I recommend that place. Don't recommend that place. And then that basically then compiles in the form of like a recommendation list. And that's what I could share with other people in like a mapped out type of way where I send this list, they see, Sam's Tokyo list, and then all my recs that show up on this map, which they could use for their sort of itinerary planning purposes.
Oh, that's so cool. I know it's funny you mentioned a restaurant in Tokyo because it got me thinking about this hole in the wall that I went to in Hong Kong. And I remember at the time, one of my college friends, she and her family were living in Hong Kong. And I remember telling her, oh my God, this restaurant was so good. You guys need to go. And she's like, what was it called? I'm like, I don't know. And then she's like, okay. She goes, well, do you remember like what part of the city you were in? And I was like, yeah. I was like, where, I can't remember what hotel it was because this was so many years ago, but I was like, where this hotel is? And she's like, yeah. I was like, well, if you walked out of their lobby and you went left, it's just so ridiculous,
Yeah.
Like trying
the only,
to give...
The only reason I know the one that I know is because I have like a random WhatsApp chat with our tour guide where she had recommended it to us when we were there, and we looked it up and we're like, is someone waiting there for us to like walk into this like dark dingy alley, and it's like surprise, but it ended up being phenomenal. So I just never delete that chat, and I just keep going back to like, I don't know what it's called, but look this up on Google.
Here's how you get there.
Go here.
Totally. I know that is like travel, and like the best part of travel though is like finding those little places, or like, I love just getting lost and then seeing like a cute cafe, or, walking down a little alley or something that looks charming. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't seem like there's any tourists here. And those people, I remember I was on Mykonos a few years ago with my mom, and she was going to take a nap. So I went for a walk, and I was walking along the water where there was a lot of different bars, and a few of them I was like, oh yeah, that I saw that one. I had that on my list because I like saw it on TikTok or saw it on Instagram. But then there was this other one that I walked by, and I promise you, I'm not exaggerating when I say it probably had about 30 people sitting there at little tables along the water. Every single person had an espresso martini. So I was like, I obviously need to stop here and have an espresso martini, and it was just like such a nice moment, or a few moments where I sat and had a phenomenal espresso martini, but that one wasn't showing up on any of the, immediate searches or all that. So
it's funny, because we could just spend a whole podcast sort of like sharing stories. We have a similar one that we have in Cabo, which same deal. Like you have like the Medano Beach, which is like, the very touristy area, the Office, Mango Deck, all the major spots. And there was this random like sushi place, which like it's just a weird spot for like a sushi restaurant that was down the beach. We're like, oh, let's just stop here. And my wife loves micheladas, and it was a similar deal where like we kind of look over, and someone had a michelada. I was like, that's like a really good michelada. And we went in, and she ended up having one. And like, it's become this place we go back to every time we go just to get a michelada. Nice, and it's like, it's just like this random, like now it's on the list of like, they have a great michelada. If you love micheladas, you got to go here. Yeah, and so it's funny just how like serendipity and happenstance come into play with how these sort of hidden gems are identified. And, that's obviously there's something to be said for like the popular places, because they're popular for a reason, because they're good, but we tend to have a sense of pride over what we've discovered, and like that is definitely a hidden gem. And then and that's like that. Then back to the platform, like how do you identify that flow of information, and again, like credit those who discover these places, and then unlock that cool experience for other people.
Okay. So you told me a bit about like how this idea came to be and how it came to life, but what is your background that led you to be able to have the confidence to say like, I can build something like this?
Not travel, not travel at all. And frankly, I think knowing what I know now about travel, if I had been from travel, I'd be like, nah, that's not going to work. But it's sort of that like blind optimism to the point of like naivete that's just like, why not? Let's try it.
I call it delusional confidence, and I'm thrilled that that's where I exist the majority of the time.
Ignorance is bliss.
Totally.
But my background's in media. So I previously worked with a company that does streaming and production of live poker tournaments and events. And
cool.
I was there for a number of years. I live in Vegas, which largely that's the reason. And it kind of actually goes back to the earlier conversation, like around share of attention. And really what got me interested in particular, like the Web3 space was trying to nurture poker fandom at the time. Like we were selling subscription packages around just hyper fans. Like I love poker so much. I want to pay to consume as much content as possible. And there was something interesting around bringing people together digitally over shared love of a certain thing. And the ability for, in my world, NFTs to be able to do that, like creating these digital artifacts that resemble one's fandom. My best comparison for it is like sports fandom, but in a traditional world, like we express that fandom with like a hat or a jersey. And if you're like, I laugh about this in travel, where like, do you have a favorite sports team?
Yeah, Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay. Oh, that must be nice.
Yeah. I've been a fan well before they were good.
Whatever you say.
I know everyone's always like, "Oh, sure," but I have been playing fantasy football for like almost 15 years now. And I had some of them on my team early on, and I was just like, you know what, this is going to be my team.
Yeah, you pick the right horse.
Yeah, seriously.
But you're a Chiefs fan. So let's say you're traveling somewhere, you're in Mykonos, and for whatever reason you're wearing a Chiefs hat or Chiefs jersey. If you were to see someone on the street wearing Chiefs apparel, it's like, damn, like we have like an immediate connection. Like we're in this totally like foreign land. We have no relationship to one another, but we know something about each other that means something to us individually in how we're related. And so like the ability, that's obviously a physical experience, but how do we create that in a digital world where we can create this interconnectivity between shared passions, experiences, likes, dislikes, whatever the case may be. And so I thought like travel was right for that, because not only is there just an inherent disconnect between one's physical experiences and a record of those experiences, like the travel is just definitionally, there's bookends to it. I go on a trip, I end the trip is over. How do you extend the shelf life of a trip to be beyond just the trip itself and being able to reconnect with one's experiences? But couple that with the fact that we already know people are striving to do this with collecting souvenirs. Like there's an innate psychology of, I want to find physical ways to preserve a record of what I've done. And we kind of all have that, like whether it's mugs or Christmas ornaments or fridge magnets, whatever the case may be. We all kind of have
I'm a magnet collector.
There you go. So you probably have the fridge somewhere of like all your record of experiences.
It makes me so happy. Like when I'm out traveling and I grab a new magnet, I'm like, oh, this is the best.
Exactly. So ours is Christmas ornaments, which I mentioned it. And so like that's around this time of year, that's part of the fun, is like getting to go put up the tree and put up our ornaments and like, oh, I remember this trip here, or which time in Cabo was this? Oh yeah, it was for this wedding or whatever. And so getting to like reminisce on those times together. And it's also a point of pride, really, when you have somebody in your home and they get to see these cool things you've collected and ask you about, oh, you've been here, that's awesome, how was it, blah, 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 blah. And so just all of that combined was basically what led to this, of like, why can't that be made digital? Why can't we create this experience of, what's why we call them digital souvenirs, like literally creating digital records of one's experience, putting that forth in a sort of virtual profile of all the cool things you've done across the world, and then creating worthwhile experiences around that. And that was like the early sort of like, what is this actually going to become? That's what led to the whole recommendation piece. When you really realize how much of our past experiences go towards the future experiences from others via word of mouth recommendation sharing. So you kind of then build this flywheel effect of like, okay, I'm going to collect things as I travel for my own posterity, but then I get to outwardly display these things for the purposes of other people's inspiration, and then unlocking rewards and incentive mechanics around that.
Okay. So what types of rewards? I mean, is it like levels or, color rewards or medals or?
Yeah. So, I mean, in a very real way, in the not so distant future, we don't have it fully built out yet, but it will be. That's where the crypto stuff comes into play. So essentially what that'll look like is for all intents and purposes, because like cryptos, for a lot of people, it's like, no, it's scary, I don't want that. But think about it as what I always say to people who aren't crypto people, it's like a credit card point that you truly own, where you can use it in our rewards marketplace. Like we will have like free travel, sweepstakes giveaways, apparel, merchandise. You could like donate it to charities, just like things like that, affiliate offers, whatever. Okay. But you could also sell it. You could also send it to someone else. You could buy, you could trade. Like you sure can't trade your Chase points, or you sure can't sell your Chase points. So it's like it's a point that you truly own, which then it's like, that's just a cryptocurrency. But I think crypto tends to turn people off. It feels very scammy, but that's what we hope is like a real viable use case for it, of basically getting to assign you value for the bookings that you've generated via the recommendation shared, and then allowing you to do with that value whatever you want, whether it's putting that towards rewards redemption or taking it to friends and selling it, trading it, whatever you want to do.
Okay, that is so cool. And I mean, as far as crypto goes, I know that there's still a lot of skeptics, although if you're paying attention to what Bitcoin's doing, I don't think that you can be too skeptical, especially over the last few weeks, right?
Hey, yeah. I mean, I work in the industry and I'm very skeptical. What I always say is there's not a lot of reason to use it yet. And I think that's what the challenge is the real value in it today is number go up. We want to invest in it and we want to make money off of it. But I got into this world, back to the media stuff. I got into this because I think there's value to it beyond just money making and profiteering. Okay. And I think that goes into the community aspects and the sharing aspects and the connection and what that can do in travel. And then the output of that obviously being rewards based, but not in a way that's I'm going to spam recommendations so that I make money off of this. It's more of an emission of even a small amount of value and benefit and credibility towards something that you were already doing. And it's hey, if I could have my list in Apple Notes and have a harder time sharing them while getting nothing out of it, or I could use this platform where it's easier to share these things that I'm already sharing, and I can get some small benefit from doing so. Not to mention the credibility and the clout of your status within this ecosystem, that both extrinsically and intrinsically has value to people. And so we're trying to create something for that.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I feel with more and more you share, I'm more and more excited about getting involved in all of this. So is this your first foray into entrepreneurship, or were you doing something on your own prior in your other?
So it's never on your own. Obviously there's a solopreneur thing. So I would be remiss to say that this is all just me. I like to say that I'm the dumbest person on my team, and it's exactly designed that way because I have very smart people around me that are really leading the charge with this. But I've been around entrepreneurship in general, early stage startup stuff for quite a while, both in an operational but also in an investment capacity. With the poker company, I was really blessed to have a sort of speed run of startup ladder climbing, if you will. Okay. So basically, it's kind of a side story, but we started the poker business as what was at the time a 24/7 TV network. Think of the Golf Channel, but for poker content. Okay. And so this was I was pretty fresh out of college. It was 2014. And if you recall back to those times, I think the only streaming services then were Netflix, I think Hulu maybe, and that was about it. There was Crunchyroll was a big one for anime, so there was very few niche ones especially, but streaming wasn't a thing yet. No Disney Plus, no ESPN Plus, no Apple TV Plus, no Peacock, none of them. And so here we were trying to make what is frankly still kind of an antiquated, outdated TV model work of basically trying to get carriage and all of these major dish, satellite, cable providers. Okay. And the business model was entirely beholden to gaining that carriage. Meanwhile, everyone who had that carriage was saying, I'm going to launch a streaming platform and I'm going to disconnect from this business model and I'm going to take this directly to consumers. Meanwhile, I'm someone who's never had cable. I've never had satellite, still haven't. I've done everything I've ever done streaming. And a lot of people that I was surrounded by as poker players and poker fans felt similarly. And so this kind of thought to myself, hey, why are we doing this? Why wouldn't we, instead of trying to be a TV network, why would we bundle up this content, sell it direct to consumer, and create a streaming platform? And so within a year or two, I won't go into the details of it, but basically the regime that had come in for TV was no longer with the company, and streaming had come to do quite well very quickly. And so we ended up pivoting entirely to this new model, which going back to it is I was very blessed to be in a executive level role at that early stage of the company, basically building a startup media network, if you will. And so that was sort of my first foray into it. And I ended up leaving that business in 2020, right around when COVID hit, because poker, a very tactile sport, kind of went put on pause for a while, and level set of myself of is this what I want to be doing? I love poker, but I was kind of getting burnt out professionally. And so sought out to do my own thing to use the phrase. And that's what eventually became MintPass.
Okay. So how big is the MintPass team today?
There's, I believe, 7 of us total. Across a lot of product and dev, and then we're ramping up the marketing side of the business in I guess the past several weeks, but in the weeks and months ahead as well, as we take this thing to market.
Okay, cool. So what's your favorite part about being a travel entrepreneur?
Favorite part? I would say my favorite part is I get to travel a lot, but that's not exactly true. Like it's like, it's the sad irony of now being so busy is like, I created this business out of a love for travel. And then now that I have this business, I don't get to travel just because, well, obviously like there's conferences and whatnot, but it's like, it's a different type of travel to go to like wine and dine and go to conference centers as opposed to like going to just live and be.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
I will say that I feel less guilty traveling. Like I could test our app while I'm traveling. So it's like, it's not completely sunk time. But I think in general, it's like, I think I mentioned we're going through soft launch right now. And we've worked really, really, really hard for like the past year and a half to create this initial thing. And it's still far from perfect. And it's much further from frankly where I want it to be. But I think that's the state of anything for any founder. Yeah. But it's just to have those moments, those in time where someone takes the time to use the thing that we've spent so much of our time creating, I think is really cool. And I've been doing that's sort of like, you get entrepreneurial is very up and down. Like you get sort of, you have the highs and you have the lows. And I think it's everyone's quest to make the highs, while you can enjoy them, you want to make them less high because they make for higher lows. Like you kind of want to keep yourself here as opposed to going steady. Like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you like, I've had low moments and low weeks, low days, whatever. And what brings me out of those is just putting product in users' hands. And it's even not positive feedback, just getting feedback, I think is an amazing thing. And it's like, there's a lot of things that take people's attention these days. And so for people to want to allocate a even small percentage of that time to us and the thing that we've created, I think is a really cool thing. And what I enjoy most about the process at large.
No, I love that. I mean, one of the things that I've learned so much about entrepreneurship is, well, I guess two things that I think are relevant to what you just said. Number one is that, if you have the idea and you just start, your users will end up telling you like what it is that they want to see and what it is that they like and what it is that they don't like. And then also, I think that there is a lot of validation in either direction that can come from sharing your idea, and you can quickly learn, hey, is this something that is cool? Is it a nice to have, or is this something that it's like, whoa, I could really use this? Like, this is a need to have. And I'm sure there's people that could argue, like, oh, well, travel, like, that must be nice. Like, not everybody can travel, or this, that, or do you really need things for travel? But I mean, the travel industry is enormous. And so, I mean, truly, like, I laugh sharing things with my friends who are more well-traveled than I am. And it's literally Google Docs, like text strings that you can tell have just been copy pasted and saved in a note and just like send. Because there's always some random like anecdote or something where it's like, oh, tell Jim we said hi. And it's like, huh? Like that wasn't meant for me, but this is probably a text that's been shared 25 times.
Yep, exactly. And it's like, and it's something cool around, I think the crypto term is composability, where you basically, we build on each other's experiences over time. Like I think it was like Lego blocks where like you have a recommendation with a recommendation with a recommendation, which creates a row. And then I take that and put my own blocks on top of it. And then I hand it off to someone else who puts their blocks on top of it. So there's just a lot of like, there's a lot that translates well into this very tech forward world that we live in, that we want to make digestible and understandable and valuable for people like yourself who are experiencing things elsewhere. And there's a larger theme there for like, and I feel strongly about in the crypto industry, like there's a reason why people don't use crypto or don't want to use crypto. And it's because it's very complicated and it's exploitative in many instances. And there's not a lot of reason to do so. What we want to do is basically unpack what it is and pull out the pieces that are valuable and deliver that in a way that is digestible to people. And so that's a lot of where this comes into play, but obviously with travel being the focal point of that.
Yeah.
But that's our challenge, is doing that in a way that makes sense for people and gives them something that they actually want to use.
I mean, I think you're onto something very, very unique because there isn't anything right now. I mean, of course, there are countless rewards programs for all of the different, anything really these days, right? But it's like, what's the value in some of those programs? And even the ones that are great, airline miles, hotel points, things like that, or just credit card points that you can use to buy all the different things. You still, like you said, you can't sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, there have been things where they have been stolen. I mean, there's value in them. So by using the blockchain and crypto to create these points that are strictly mine, and then I get to do with them what I want, and if selling them is an option, I think that's really, really unique, and I think that you guys are definitely onto something.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it goes to actually your point around, like, I what I talk about here is like the eventuality, the blue sky vision of what this will be. And that's part of the fun of the entrepreneurship journey is like, just what we put out there today won't be that, but it's just like putting something out into the world and then figuring out how we get there. And the largest part of that is conversations like this of like, what are the aspects of what we think will be valuable that are truly valuable?
Yeah.
How do we prioritize that? And how do we build it as efficiently as possible in the way that people want it? And I mean, it's like the YC cliche to say like build something people want, but there's a lot of truth to it, and that people miss the mark on that a lot of time, thinking that like I have like, especially when they do it in the Web3 space, very tech forward, they say like I have this very like big brain concept of like the new way to revolutionize zero knowledge proofs on chain, blah 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 blah. And it's like, wait, no one actually cares about that if they don't get something out of it that is helpful, beneficial to them, that delivers them value. So there's a lot to unpack in all of that. But again, it's just kind of like, that's part of the entrepreneurship journey, is just taking that day by day and trying to figure it out the rest as you go.
Definitely. One question I didn't ask that I do think that people listening would be curious about: is there a social aspect to your app where people can comment or chat or collect a network, or is that like almost too big of a thing to bite off, given that you're not really looking to create another social network?
There is a social component. It is today. It's very much like follow and following based. So you have friends and you want to keep up with their travels, you can follow them. If you have friends that want to follow up with your travels, they can follow you. And then I think over time, what we want to do is have it like, we literally have a page that's like it's a bit like TikTok, after kind of ragging on TikTok, where you have like the for you versus friends. So we start based upon who you follow and what you've logged, we can build a picture of how you like to travel and can give you relevant recommendations from people in the network who you may not know. But again, because we sort of create this trust layer where it may not otherwise exist. We know that we can trust the recommendations. We want to serve them to you because we verify them to be real, and we know they travel like you. So we could present that to you alongside the recommendations of your friends, which are the people you follow. So it'll be less of like, people ask us that a lot about like, what about travel meetups and like sort of comment functionality and stuff like that. And it's less like traditional interactive social in that regard. I always say it's like more informational in nature. Like we want it to mirror what it is when you get that spreadsheet. Yes, it's great to have the conversation with the person, but rather I kind of just want the recs, and then I want to do with them what I may, as opposed to like having to like to talk to them throughout the experience itself. So I think of it as like an inspiration network as opposed to like a social network, but there's certain social components that come into play.
Okay. No, I think that's great, because I mean, I feel like the last thing we need is one more place where we can chat with each other on. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that, like that tweet before where it's like, oh yeah, I'm having, different conversations in 4 different apps with my best friend about all these. And it's like, sometimes like I have friends who have my phone number that will message me in Instagram, and I'm like, why are you texting me? Why are you sending me a message in Instagram? Like, so it's like, nuts. That's truly the last thing we need is one more chat feature. And I was also thinking too, I would imagine that as this grows and, you have different folks that are following you because they travel similarly or like what you're doing and like to follow your journeys, is that perhaps in maybe like your little, avatar or whatever, if you have like your name and your location, if you choose or whatever, maybe you could, and there's a spot where you could add like, here's my Instagram handle if you want to connect or something, or LinkedIn or email or whatever it may be. And then it's like real, connections can be made should people want to. To do
no, there's one of the ways that we talk to creators and pitch creators is like the Instagram news feed is very good for like window shopping. where I can go to a creator, I can go to an influencer and see like the highlights of everything that they've done. And you think about like if I wanted to really make that actionable, like I'm planning a trip to Berlin and I want to see if my favorite creator has been to Berlin and what they did while they were there. The only way that I could do that is scrolling through their feed, trying to find something that looks vaguely like the Nuremberg Wall or whatever it is. Like, oh, that sounds like Berlin. Is it? No. Okay, I'll keep going. Or you go to their highlights, flip through, and then get the centipede of stories. Like, okay, click. Oh, that looks interesting. Like, let me figure out where that is. Oh, that's far from our hotel. Let's keep going. So like, it's really not conducive to actually making travel decisions based upon what someone else has done. So what we see is like this being the top of Linktree for a creator. So it's like, here is the highlight reel of everything that I've done. But if you want to dive deeper into my verified experiences and take my recommendations, check out my MintPass profile. And so it goes both ways where, and that's what, as you would expect, we get asked that a lot by like investors of like, how are you going to take traffic from Instagram? Like we're not, we're just trying to like, we're trying to be a tool for someone who's very Instagram savvy, but also supplement with more, with, I don't say more information, but better information that again is like informational and actionable, unlike the traditional social landscape, which is very like noisy, glamorized, filter driven, algorithm focused, all of these things that actually don't matter to what we really want, which is just great recommendations.
Right. Yeah. It's like, tell me what the real deal is. Like, have you been to Cambodia?
No, I haven't.
So I went there years ago, and you know, there's so many like iconic photos of Angkor Wat, right? Where it's just like where the sun is rising and it's mirrored on the water in front of it. And so we were like, oh my God, that looks so beautiful. We need to go there. We need to do that. So we go there and we do that. And there's literally hundreds and hundreds of people. And we're like, what is going on? You know? And then I was able to get that iconic photo, but I laughed when I showed it to people because I'm like, do you know how many people were standing behind me? Like I had to shove my arm through people so I could get the photo.
Yeah. I, on a separate note, Kimberly, our head of product marketing, just recently, she's living right now. She's a nomad, but she's out in Bangkok currently. And she went and saw Mundane recently. Okay. The pygmy hippo that's like gone viral across everything. Yes. Okay. And it was a very similar experience for her of like, like gave her phone to her tall friend and is like trying to like capture like just a little glimpse of this little hippo. So it's kind of like, and that's, there's place for that, and like that's what I tell people, like I'm not trying to tell you not to go to La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, or there's the one I think about in I think I saw an article recently in Bali, I think, where it's like those arches when you like stand in a similar type of way where the water reflects, like the sun goes through the arches and then reflects on the water, and I've heard it's very similar where like it's like a line a mile long in order to get that same shot that like everyone has. And we're not telling you not to do that, but we don't want your trip to revolve around that. And there's if you're not that type of person, like I certainly am not, like I would not go on my way for a photo op like that if it entailed waiting for multiple hours on end. But where are the hidden gems around that will lead to, you may not get the experience that everyone else has had, but you'll get the experience that's more authentic. You'll get the experience that is undiscovered. And ultimately, like, that's what people probably want is being able to go off the beaten path a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, this has been so much fun. I've loved learning more about MintPass and what you guys are doing and how you're trying to solve the problem of travel organization and authentic recommendations. So how can folks find MintPass? You said the App Store. Anywhere else?
Yeah. So as of about a few days ago, time's a social construct at this point in the calendar. Who knows what day it is? As a few days ago, we are in app stores. So if you look up MintPass, MintPass, we have a little like arrow in a passport book app icon. You'll find us there. That's available for download immediately. It's actually, the app is going to be invite only here shortly. So if you I don't know when this is going to be out, but it might be invite only.
It'll be out in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Okay. So it is invite only today, but I'll give you alpha. Just message me on LinkedIn or message me anywhere, any of my channels, and I'll get you access. Awesome. And I can be found at Sam Simmons on LinkedIn.
Wonderful.
And it's I'm wearing like, I have like the standard founder pose in a vest or something like that. So look out for me, shoot me a message. And honestly, like I was not blowing smoke earlier. Like, we love the feedback. So we'd love for people just to try it out. Let us know what they think, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and have fun using it.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to download it the second we stop recording. So, Sam, thank you so much for joining me. It's been so fun. I could seriously probably talk to you for another hour, no problem. And everybody who is listening, watching, thank you so much for always being here. Please remember to subscribe, like, comment, give me your feedback. I love hearing from you all, and we will see you next week.
Thanks so much.